Welcome back to yet another video on Java series. Today we are going to look onto the tech stack which is mandatorily required for any Java developer. So whether you are a fresher, whether you are an experienced, whether you are a mid-level Java developer, these are the skills you mandatorily require, and the HR, when you try to shortlist any candidate, the screening, right? So these are the skills which are mandatorily looked up, and if these skills are not there in your resume and you are not aware of this particular concepts and you have not worked on this, there is a possibility that you may not be shortlisted for the first level itself. So before you go to any interviews, make sure that you watch this video till the end. You look out at all the tech stack which are mentioned here, get prepared, and look into all aspect of it. Get well prepared for these all areas, so that you can crack any interview, whether it's a fresher level, whether it's an experience, whether it's a mid level. So you prepared in all area. Let's get started. Now, I mentioned the experience levels, like from fresher till the experience like more than 12 years. So basically, when it comes to Java developer, right? So after 12, 13 or 14 years, like the people normally go for an architect role or a project manager role. There are few people who are after 14, 15 or 16 years, they still tend to be a developer, but majorly if you go with the trend, right, after 12 to 14 years, they move to either lead levels or to a project manager or an assistant project manager or a Java architect, right? So that is the reason I have mentioned here that from freshers which are very college passed out, or who have not yet started their journey. Then it comes freshers, like as I said, they will be given training in the organizations. They will be undergoing training on all sort of different trainings, programming, behavioral, etc., right? So there people might choose Java as a career, and this is one of the longest running programming language. So now if you see, it has got a lot of integration. Now it has got Spring Boot, it's got integration with Kafka, it has got integration with cloud, NoSQLs, a lot of integration. So this is one of the most frequently used and most used Java language, which is Java. Secondly, if you see, there are experience level 0 to 2 years. So people who have passed out and then joined the organization, they spend couple of years in organization. So it's typically people who join as in any organization tend to work for 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years, based on their stability of the projects, and then availability of the projects, their locations, right? Then comes 2 to 4 years, then it comes 4 to 6 years, then it comes 6 to 8 years, till year, if you have reached this, you have pretty hands-on the experience on the tech stack, right? So they may expect a decent amount of basics, mid-level questions, programming, data structure. I will go to each level of what type kind of tech stack you require. But yeah, and the experience level of 8 to 10, 10 to 12, and 12 plus, right? So these are the experience level where they will ask you basics, a lot of in-depth questions. They ask you right from very basics to the very advanced. They expect you to be having a knowledge which is an expertise of level, not just mugging up or knowing high level things, right? They want you to know the deep details of how Java interfaces, abstraction, what are the core concepts, how class loaders work, very deep knowledge of how Java internally works, right? And how memory garbage collection works. So these all are expected when you go to after 8 years of an experience. So the questions are different there. They ask you the different set of questions, they ask you different set of programmatic questions, right? And the way you attend depends on the company as well, right? And the interview as well. So make sure you are based on your experience, you try to prepare yourself, right? Now let's look at the next slide. So these are the list of tech stacks which are mandatory. Let's say when you are attending for any Java developer or Java lead, or Java fresher, or you are trying to choose a career, right? So for Java, so these are the mandatory. So Java is very mandatory. So this is one of the uh, object oriented language, which is most farly used, like in any of the organizations. And if you tend to see, like many big organization, like the banking, the finance, media, the any industry, if you see, the this Java holds a good hold in all the like whether it's an monolith projects, whether it's a microservice project, whether it's an old project, whether it's an new projects, like this Java has a place in it. And like it has been modernized, and then there are different latest version has been introduced based according to the new modern changes which has happened, right? So it is running according to the modern age, and it is getting updated with the latest version. So if you see, there were prior to Java 8, if you see, there were 7, there were 5, there were latest versions, right? So there is other major versions. Now if you see, majorly, if you see, people are working on Java, like if you ask them, right? And the interviewer definitely asked, like which version of Java you are currently working. He wanted to currently understand whether you are currently working on the latest version and you have kept yourself updated, or like you are working on Java 8, 11, 17, or 21, or the latest, right? So based on your response, like he will try to judge and to understand, right, whether you have, let's say you say Java 8. Now if you see, the latest version today is around 22 or 21, 21 or 22, right? So he might expect that you have not made yourself up to date to the latest version. So what is the reason, right? So he may ask, like why have you not moved to your, why your project is not moved to the 21 or 22, what is the latest, what is the reason? Okay. And he expects, like whether, let's say, maybe your organization or a project is currently in the old version, but you still need to make yourself up to date till 21 or 22, so that interviewers, when you ask a question, what are the new features in Java 21, let's say, so you should be able to answer him, right? So no matter, like what version you are working, right? So he might ask you, like any questions from Java 8, any questions from Java 11, any question from Java 17, right? So he may not restrict to just typically the latest version, right? When interview try wanted to understand about your basics, right, he will ask you right from the basics, from the collections which are from the starting, right, till the latest versions of Java, right, 21. So throughout that, you'll try to understand each concept, each basics, right? So you need to be prepared. So get a list of features which are there in Java 8, get a list of features which are there in Java 11, 17, 21. Make a note of them, try to list down all those things, get an hands-on practical, hands-on understanding of it, right? So this will make you ready for the interview. Okay. So no matter what questions he asks, you will be able prepared to answer at least whatever, right, he asks. Now when it comes to Java as an whole, right, basically he will ask you the core Java. So when it comes to core Java, it means, like oops concepts, right? So these are strings. What are strings? The collections, right? There are different set of collections, like list, set. Map is not a collection, but it is one of the collection, but it is not in the hierarchy. It is like list of set. But yeah, then he may ask you serialization process, garbage collection, how internally it works, how memory is working in Java, right? Uh, the heap and stack memory. How do you handle the exceptions, right? What are the different levels of exception, and what are different types of exception, like runtime or error, or checked exceptions, right? What are different kind of exceptions, exception hierarchy, throws and throwable, right? These are all the concepts which you need to understand. Multi-threading, when it comes to making it work in a different threads, right? There is an with like with the latest versions being introduced, there has been executor frameworks, there has been locks which were earlier introduced in a private version, right? So entrant lock, there are different kind of locks were introduced, right? Cyclic barrier, etc. Generics has been introduced. uh, then there are data structures and algorithms like binary tree, etc., right? So these are all they wanted to understand, like you're well aware of this particular concept, because they will revolve the interval when let he set a time of around, let's say, 1 hour, right? We'll try to revolve around Java basics for 15-20 minutes to understand, in every aspect of Java, whether you are aware of every concepts or not, right? Now, whether you are I mean, I've seen, like I was attended many interviews. If you see, the very commonly asked and mostly asked, okay, whether you are in latest 21 version, or like you are accepted, you are updated to 21 version, still interviewer Manaitu would like to know, like what are the latest versions has been introduced in the Java 8, right? So if you see, Java 8 is one of the important updates, and it has got a lot of features like Lambda expression, stream API, date API, many functional interfaces into. There are different functions, predicate, supplier, consumers, right? Optional features has been introduced to handle null pointer exception. So these are the, if you cover up, and then you get well prepared, right? So there are different kind of like the collection. Let's say in the collection, if you see, he may ask you what is the difference between the old collection like vector and array list. What is the difference between set or map? What is the difference between tree set and tree map? What is the difference between array list and vector, right? What is the difference between hash map and a concurrent hash map? Then copy on write, right? So there are different concurrent API has been introduced. How do you use them? What are the internal working of those, right? So these might be the questions which they ask you to understand whether you are fully aware of the basics, right? So it is better that whether you are a fresher. So it will make your weightage more than for other candidates if you get well prepared for this, right? So let's say there are 20 people who have come along with you for an interview, right? So if you're well prepared for this, you will be straightly in the top 1% of this particular interview, right? They will, you will be able to crack any interviews, right? So you will be in the top 1% if you get prepared in this. Now let's go to the tech stack. So now, as you grow with your organization, and you grow with your latest tech stack, right? Now, along with Java, right? So there are different frameworks we have been working on, right? So now any developer who, now any organization, they are currently modernizing the application. They are making utilize they are making use of Spring Boot features, right? So which will ease your development, which you are like there are many benefit when it comes to using this. So prior to earlier, like where you have to develop everything, dependency management, deployment, and everything is taken care, right? Now with the help of the Spring and Spring Boot, right, it has become easier for the developer to build and deploy, right? So it drastically reduced the development cycle. It drastically help the configuration related things, right? So the Spring and Spring Boot, right? So these are the, we have dependency injection, we have inversion of control in it. There we have different integrations with a lot of other using the Spring Boot, right? So we have Spring Cloud, we have Spring Batch, we have a lot of other integration. So microservices based architecture also has, we have a very good integrations. Um so once you prepare on this, like you interview will definitely ask Spring and Spring Boot, right? So he may ask you like, what are the scopes, what is the life cycle, what are the annotations, uh, how do you deploy your application, where do you deploy your application, what are the configurations, what is the starter framework, what are the configuration, what is auto configuration, what is the REST controller, how do you define those, what are the different status methods, how do you handle the exception handling, right? So these are all concepts, aspect oriented programming, Spring Boot, right? Exception handling at the global level, how you are handling it. These are all the concepts which are definitely being asked when it comes to Spring Boot, right? So make sure you go and well prepared in it, right? In that, we have an integration with databases, right? Spring Data JPA. How do you connect from, Spring Data JPA to your databases, whether it's an SQL, whether it's a NoSQL? So there are different kind of database we make use of. So along, like, whether it's your monolith, whether it's your microservice architecture, you definitely need different databases according to your requirements. Maybe you want a very dynamic, very scalables, right? In that case, NoSQL comes handy, right? So these are all like, cloud based, and then, NoSQL, right? Where it may be, it will scale up according to your, throughput, right? So when you're trying to insert a lot of data, when you're trying to read data, based on the request, number of requests, it will scale up, right? So there are, earlier we had a problem with the SQL where, it was not that scalable, as per, like, when there was a need, right? So hence, like, no SQL has been brought in, and it has got various structure. There is no structure required, like, as in the table structure which was earlier required for Oracle, right? So MongoDB, if you see the document oriented, it's a JSON kind of database. So it's, there are different kind of, style and data storage where it can be stored in a different formats. Now, Spring Data JPA, we can integrate with any databases, right? So whether it's an SQL or no SQL, it provides a provision to connect to the database. The Hibernate is one of the ORM where we can connect to the databases, right? The SQL, and we can write those HQL queries. We can write name queries. We can write complex queries to, database, right? We can have cache. We can have versioning. We can have transaction management. So Spring also provide a very good support for this transaction management, right? So majorly when you are dealing with any databases, right, it's atomicity, like, if you see atomic redundancy, stability, right? So the atomic concepts has to be well handled, right? So there should not be any duplication of data. The normalization should be happened properly. This all should be taken care, and these are all the prerequisite, I would say. Now, when it comes to Spring, like in earlier when it was and the rest, like when you're trying to hit on any of these particular area, on the same time, at the same time, you used to get that particular response, right? So nowadays we have a reactive Webflux programming where we have an non-blocking API written, right? So when you're trying to request it, right? So it doesn't block your request until that, it will not wait for the request to complete. It will, once the request is processed by it, it actually return to the caller. So there are introduction of, like, Spring Webflux and reactive programming. You should definitely learn those, like, GraphQL is there. We have Webflux, we have reactive program. And then when it comes to, any tech stack, right? Nowadays, like, every organization is looking for a microservice based architecture. They are now trying of moving their monolith applications to, they are modernizing it to microservice architecture. So it, microservice has got its own benefits. It has got its own databases, it has got its own services, it has got its own, like, transaction handling mechanism. So it does what exactly it is required to does. It follows various design pattern like Saga. It has got orchestration, right? Two-phase commit, right? So it gives you a lot of benefits. It has got its own overhead, but there are some benefit. There are major benefit when it comes to, like, choosing which language. There is an independent team. The life cycle of testing is quick, right? So you can choose whenever you want to release there. So there is a testing. scope is little bit because earlier in monolith we used to um, exactly test whole application when its model change in any of the application, right? Here we need to only small test that particular that single microservices, and then we can integrate and test it, right? There are different kind of testing we can use to test it. So different, there are 12 factor apps, right? To make your microservices sorted, and then follow the different design patterns, right? There are different more design patterns to it. That is sidecar design pattern is there. There are different patterns available. Mm, JMS or Kafka. So this is one of the messaging brokers. So when it comes to non-blocking and whether you want something to be emitted to any of these particular consumers. Let's say you want to publish something, right, data to any of these consumers. So let's say you have millions of records, and these particular millions of records you need to be made available to any of this particular user, right? So in any of this, in ideal scenario, what you would do is that you definitely would try to process chunk by chunk, process those, let's say 1 lakh or 10,000 one by one, and then process it, right? So with the help of this Kafka and JMS, right, we can actually make use of this scalability and durability features, where it can actually, when you're trying to publish those messages into this particular queue, right, it can actually scale up, and then it can push those particular data, and then once everything is done, it can scale down, right? So Kafka has got its own zookeeper which will handle scaling, which has got partitioning, it will store the replication, right? So the data will be stored into more than one two locations. So there is a if there is a failure, then it can be handled, right? So there it can actually be used as an a processing, where when, let's say you wanted to process something in middle before the actual data is being done, right? So you can make use of Kafka, where it does the processing, and then it will publish the data. Dockers and Kubernetes, these are all containerization, where you wanted your the application to be deployed over there, and then when there is an scaling, right, we want your multiple instances, right? We can make use of this particular Docker instances to scale up whenever it is required, and when there is no scale required, it can actually reduce those particular pods or Dockers, right? Now when it any interview when you go, right, it definitely at the end, once you're done with your Java basics, when you're done with Spring, when you're done with databases, he will definitely ask, like, what kind of, where you deploy your application, whether you have worked on microservices or not, have you have any cloud experience or not. So he'll try to understand, like, what different cloud platform have you explored. If you go to AWS, right, there are different cloud practitioner, there are different certifications available. So cloud practitioner, solution architect, there are developer, right? So there are different services, right? And if we go to AWS, right, cloud platform provide various different services. Like it has got EBS, EC2, it has got VPC, it has got a lot of many in AWS, Lambda for the serverless programming, right? Deployment. So it has got a lot of services which are enabled. So they wanted to know, like, whether you are aware of this particular cloud platforms. So along with AWS, there is a Azure. Azure has got of their own services and available, right? So there is Google platform, GCP it is called. So they have their own platform engines, right? And then PCF. So it is pivotal crowdfunding. This is one of the cloud cloud platform as well. So do brush up your basics on it, and try to get the latest details on, like, what is the tech stack being used by the latest Java developer along with AWS. So um, not many, I would say, like, not every, I would say, organization required, but some of the organization requires as a mandatory. And if you look at the eligibility criteria or their prerequisite, right? So they'll mention like whether they want it mandatorily or like good to have it, right? So please check that, and then we'll prepare accordingly. So design pattern. Now this is one of the important and very crucial when it comes to a Java interview. After revolving around basics and like some Spring and other stuff, they will definitely come to data design patterns, right? So they would like to know in Java what are the design patterns you used. Now, if you see, Java itself is structured with many different design patterns, right? Whether it is singleton, whether it is factory, whether it is builder design pattern, whether it is proxy, whether it is like there are different three categories, right? Behavior, structure, creational. These are all different design patterns when it comes to Java. So you need to be well aware of what this particular and when do we use this, and what in when situation we apply this. So interviewer might ask you about they wanted to design something, right? So they want you to make use of one of this particular design pattern and achieve that particular solution, right? So they may ask you to write a code snip skeleton of like I wanted to design something. So in that case, design pattern is well handy, and like if you hold a very good knowledge in this, there is a possibility that you will be considered, even though if you don't do well in any of the other area of Java, right? So if you are well aware of design patterns, right, so there might be a possibility of getting crack that interview. There are different J2EE design patterns as well. There are different microservice design pattern, as I told a couple of minutes ago. So there are sidecar, there are 12 factor app, there are saga, there are choreography, orchestration, many design patterns which when it comes to microservices to face commit, right? So you prepare like they will ask you like how do you centralize logging, what is Eureka, what is service discovery, when it comes to like microservices, like what all components are used. API gateway is there. We have Eureka discovery services, right? Centralized configuration, centralized logging, uh, service mesh. So when you're trying to communicate with lot of other microservices, how do you communicate? How do you handle the transaction management? How do you log those? Where do you log those? What is ELK, right? So these are all the when it comes to microservices, they may ask you, right? Now along with these all basics, right, which I have told you, right, these are one of the tools or list of softwares which we are definitely use along with the development, right? So Git, now if you see, Git is something but is a repository, centralized repository where your code is saved. So when you do any commit, when you do any code commit and push it, like before it is after it is reviewed, it will be merged to your repository, right? So many organizations use many different repositories. So there is GitHub, there are SVN, there are different clients available like Totai, there are different Bitbucket, this different which may use like Git repositories there where we can use it. So from your client machine, you can actually push your commits to another server so that it is available to all the developers. Now, along with CI/CD pipeline. Nowadays, if you see, DevOps is much more being asked up. They wanted to understand whether you have you done any Jenkins configuration, how your deployment happens, what happens when it comes to deployment, right? So after your build, after your development testing, unit testing, and then QA testing, how do you deploy those on the servers, right? So they wanted to understand those things. So they will ask you like have you worked on any configuration? If you see in Jenkins, we can integrate with SonarQube. Now SonarQube is what, like it will try to, these are all coding standards, these are all duplicate code. So it guides you, to not to do any mistake, or like any code snippet, duplicate code, or any bug you have introduced in your new code, or testing has been failed. So these are all indicated by the Sonar Cube. A Confluence page is an documentation. These are mostly used by the clients. So architecture diagrams, the documentations, any minutes of meeting, communications, all sort of informations are stored in Confluence page. Jira tools, like we have different. We follow agile methodology, Scrum, right? So agile Jira is one of the software where we maintain the requirements. We have backlogs, we have burn down charts defined in that. So with the Scrum Master making use of that particular, he define the user stories, he create the user stories, he assign those particular start, he allocate them to the developers, he track those particular development, like let's say 2 weeks of sprint is there, he will track from day one what development has been done, whether the developer has logged the efforts or not, whether he has put the comments or not, whether the story is complete or not. All sort of information is available in Jira. What the requirement is about, what is the acceptance criteria, how much development has been done, how much ticket has completed, what is the story point, right? All sort of information is available in Jira. Now, as I already mentioned, Sonar Cube, this is used for helping the developer to reduce or improve their code quality. So in order to them to avoid duplicate code, duplicate, and then duplication, they will give it gives you a different variation of minor, major, and critical versions of code snippet which is giving a problem, right? Cucumber is a behavioral testing framework. So now you have JUnit. So when it comes to unit testing, you will be able to JUnit and test it, right? So whatever code of our component, whether it written in the controller, whether it in service, whether it is in the DAO, right? You should be able to test your each line of code, whatever you written, right? So with the help of JUnit 5, with the help of JPower Mock and Mockito, you will be able to test it. Now, when it comes to memory management, memory leaks, so there might be a possibility that developer has written the code, but it has not written optimized, right? So these are the tools which are used to understand, like the heap dump is taken from the server. They will try to analyze, like visual memory analyzer are the tools which are used for analyzing it. So I hope I've covered most of the tech stack which are definitely asked, and like if you get well prepared in this particular tech stack which I have mentioned, you will be definitely be able to crack the interviews. Take my words. Thank you for watching.